Tulips. So prim, so proper, so regal. A perfectly lovely and well-mannered way to bring in the springtime. Wait. Tulips. Are they native to the North America? Non-native? Or are they ill-mannered invasives? Non-native. Okay. There are about 75 to 150 species of tulip, depending on your source, and not a single one is native to North America. Confidence interval on this? Extremely high. Tulips are non-native, but they are not considered invasive because they don't grow quickly and they don't grow out of control and they don't cause significant environmental harm, generally speaking. And tulips are definitely not spreading wildly anywhere. They have been bred to be mostly like annuals, only coming up once. They are non-native though, meaning they don't originate here in North America. A native plant is something that originates in a particular place and is part of the balance of nature in that place that has developed and adapted there for hundreds and thousands of years. So plants that are here in the United States that have been here since before European settlement are generally considered native. So where are tulips from? How did they get here? And what might you plant instead that's native to our own beautiful country and similar-ish to tulips? Alrighty, tulips are native to the Tian Shan and Pamirulai mountain ranges. These mountains are around the border area of China and Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. Central Asia, really. Some sources put tulips as being native to as far west as Turkey, but I think those are in error. So in 1055, they were taken a bit westward from those mountain ranges and cultivated in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, not Constantinople. So if you've a date in Constantinople, she'll be okay. So 400 years jumping forward, they were grown by the Ottoman Turkish Empire, and cultivation began in Persia, which is now Iran, and became a symbol of the Ottoman Empire. Did you know that tulips are the national flower of Afghanistan? Jumping forward another 100 years, in the mid-1500s, tulips made their way from Asia to Europe by this guy, Augier Ghislain de Bousbecq, a Viennese ambassador to Turkey in the court of Suleiman the Magnificent. So he sent some tulips from Asia to Europe. Okay, so not long after that, so this is kind of an interesting little story, in 1562, the first tulips were planted in the Netherlands by Carolus Clusius. So he was a botanist, very interested in bulbs, and we often associate tulips with the Netherlands, but they didn't actually make it to the Netherlands until the 1500s. Did you know that the tulip is also the national flower of the Netherlands? Interesting choice, given that tulips are not native to the Netherlands. So, in 1562, this Carolus Clusius made a botanic teaching garden at the University of Leiden, and he cultivated tulips there. And so he apparently was not a very big sharing kind of guy, and he had a prickly personality. So when people saw the tulips in the teaching garden, they would tell him, "Hey, can I have some?" And he would say, "Absolutely not, get out of here." And so in 1592 and again in 1598, tulips were stolen from him. And those thefts of his tulips are really what got tulips into Europe proper more, right? And that is what really propelled tulips to something that is another interesting little story called Tulip Mania, which is really what it's called. From about 1633 to 1637, something called Tulip Mania happened. So for this relatively short period of time, and it really is just a couple years, these bulbs, these tulip bulbs, were exorbitantly priced, and many people became absurdly wealthy by selling them. Rich people just had to have them. And so there's different stories kind of floating around about, someone selling, 2 horses and all these bushels of whatever and half of their land for like a single tulip bulb. Can you imagine selling your car for someone to give you a tulip bulb? That was Tulip Mania. And so in 1637, when the tulip mania crash happened, some of these people went from absurdly wealthy to incredibly poor. Okay, so we're going to jump forward 200 years. So from 1847 to 1865, these are the first recorded years that tulips were in the United States. So they're documented as being at the Fay Estate in Lynn and Salem, Massachusetts. And then from the mid-1800s to now, they've just been here. So the main global producers of tulips and tulip bulbs are the Netherlands, and the top global importer of tulips is the United States. But tulips are not native to either of those countries. So anyway, like I said, from the mid-1800s to now, they've been here. Oh, and how we do love the early spring look of a beautiful tulip, don't we? But you know what's often missing from those early spring tulips? Pollinators. Be observant the next time you see tulips. How many bees and butterflies do you see? Not many. Bees waking up in the early spring, butterflies flapping around in the early spring. Tulips look pretty to us, but they really don't do much to provide food for those early bees and butterflies looking for a meal. Did you know that tulips don't even make nectar? And boy, these early little bumblebees really do rely on nectar as they fly from flower to flower. So tulips aren't invasive, which is good, but like I said, they're not particularly helpful for our little pollinators. And so what is a flower that looks tulip-like, comes up in early spring, but is native to the United States and has something to actually offer those hungry early spring bees and butterflies and moths? So I have 8 native plant alternatives for you to consider. I present to you red Trillium, or purple Trillium. So Trillium erectum. So this will bloom for 3 or 4 weeks, and it can form these really nice clumps over many years. And I do have to tell you that it does make an actually very foul or unpleasant odor. And this is to help attract its primary pollinators, which is actually carrion flies or carrion beetles. So some sources say that it actually is just the smell of a wet dog. It's not putrid. So I'll leave that up to you to decide. Anyways, in some states, red Trillium is endangered, threatened, or vulnerable. And I have it first here on the list because it's a very singular flower like a tulip is. And it is red, which is very pretty, like many tulips are. But the smell, that's to be considered. Second here, I have this Columbine, Aquilegia canadensis. And so besides being an early bloomer, Columbine will tolerate a large range of soil and sun types. So you can have success with it in many different places. And it is one of the first plants to provide nectar and pollen for bees. It is the larval host plant of many different butterflies. And so that larval host plant means that butterflies will land on the leaves, lay some eggs, and then when those caterpillars hatch, those caterpillars will eat the leaves of the Columbine plant. So, important part of the natural cycle, yeah? The Columbine is really good for hummingbirds. So a lot of these red flowers that come up early and are red that I'm going to present to you here attract hummingbirds. Hummingbirds really like red flowers. So you will also see hummingbirds coming to your Columbine. This next one is called Fire Pink or Silene virginica. So rocky, sandy, dry clay, rocky slopes, maybe some dry open meadow is where you'd normally find this. So it is somewhat drought tolerant, which is wonderful. It's a relative of the royal catchfly flower, if you're familiar with that, but it does bloom even earlier. Attracts hummingbirds, which you can know from its red color, and it can bloom for about a month or longer in the spring and early summer. So next I have 3 different shooting stars for you to consider. This first one is the Midland shooting star, Dodecatheon meadia. So it can become very robust and have many flowers coming out of each plant. It's a very cool shape, right? And it's got that nice dark color, a little reminiscent there of tulips. It is an ephemeral, so it goes completely dormant by late summer. Bumblebees are the chief pollinators of the shooting stars. And so bumblebees with the shooting stars do something called buzz pollination, which is kind of neat. Bumblebees will vibrate their little bodies against the little floral tube there to shake the pollen out. And so this is how they'll get that pollen, but also it will help that pollen get to other flowers too. So buzz pollination, very cool. This next one is the southern or dark-throated shooting star, Dodecatheon pulchellum. And oh my gosh, the shooting stars, they're so pretty. So again, an ephemeral, meaning it doesn't bloom for very long. All the foliage will die back. And so then this last one is the amethyst or jeweled shooting star. And so this is very fragrant, and it is somewhat rare to find. It's only isolated to a few spots in the United States. There's some limestone hills and valleys of the Midwest, you'll find it. And then there's sort of a disconnected population in the Appalachian region. So it's a plant that's of concern in some areas, but it's not really endangered. So this next one is the yellow trout lily. So some tulips are yellow, of course, which is why I chose this one, Erythronium americanum. And it's a singular flower, and it has a very nice shape. It blooms for a very short time, just a few days. And it can form these nice clumps that can take a few years to form. And it's a gentle, delicate little flower, but it is so lovely to behold. Am I right? Okay, and so for this last flower, this is not an early bloomer like tulips. This is a late bloomer, but it's red, a very beautiful red like a lot of tulips are. This is red bee balm, or Monarda didyma. And so it's very important, as I say, when you look up these native flowers, to look them up by their scientific name, because there are a lot of flowers called bee balm, and they're all related to each other. And so if you want to get the correct one, the one you're looking for, it's important to use that scientific name. So this Monarda didyma is quite favored by pollinators, and you see this beautiful red color. I mean, holy moly. It is highly attractive to hummingbirds as well. Larval host plant to a few moths, which is cool. And again, that larval host plant means the female moths will lay eggs on the leaves. The eggs will hatch into caterpillars, and those caterpillars will eat the leaves in our nice little circle of life here. It does like well-drained soil. It can spread rapidly. So you want to be mindful of that. Although this is one plant, I don't mind at all if it spreads rapidly. It is beautiful. It's in the mint family, so you can get a minty smell if you crush the leaves a little or get really close to them. And bee balm, that name, is in reference to the plants used to be used to soothe bee stings. So, if you're going to have a truly proper and well-mannered springtime, you shall dispatch with those tulip bulbs and get some down-home native plants. To get some seeds, plants, or bare roots of some of these native plants, be absolutely sure to use the scientific name when you look them up. Steer clear of hybrids and cultivars of the native plant. Just get the wild type native plant. 2 native plant companies that I truly trust to deliver all native plants, raised properly and with no hybrids, are Prairie Moon Nursery and Prairie Nursery. So I don't get anything from these companies to praise them, but it is very easy to speak well of them. I really trust the plants that I get from them. So the scientific names and the common names of everything you saw here is in the video description, as well as links to those 2 trustworthy native plant companies that I mentioned. So leave those non-native tulips to the Tian Shan and Pamirulai mountain ranges where they are native from, and start showing off what natural beauty our own splendiferous North America has to offer.